set auto-destruct sequence.
It's the time allotted that concerns me.
Recognize Picard, Jean-Luc, Captain. Recognize Riker, William T., Commander.
Maximum warp!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core Podcast. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, we've got Lord Uther and Fert Derby joining us from the Q Continuum. Welcome back, gentlemen. We are too short a season today, with too short a season from season one. Star Trek The Next Generation, and this is a good one. This is an interesting one. If ever you've wondered how Benjamin Button in space would look, this answers that question in a strange and very bizarre way. But let's not trifle too much with the details, because Fert Derby, tell us about Michael Pataki and everything going on in too short a season.
Oh, you just made my day. Thank you, UrzaMaster. Thank you, Lord Uther. And thank you, Warp Core fans. Episode 15 of Season 1, Too Short a Season. We are February 8th, 1988. The second episode in February, don't forget, 11-001-001 kicked us off that month. But here we are, jamming along, 15 episodes in. We have returning champ Rob Bowman, X-Files alum, and Reign of Fire big screen director. He is in the director's chair for this one. This is his fourth episode directing in season 1, and we've aired 15, so it's a pretty good ratio. We have a story by Michael Michaelian, which is basically just Michael with an Ian on the end of it. He also contributed to the teleplay, as did DC Fontana. Apparently, the story that was pitched by Michaelian was originally about male menopause. And as you probably recall, Angel 1 was originally about apartheid in South Africa. So they were going for ambitious themes. You can be the judge as to whether they stuck the landing. But this was originally an episode about male menopause. And what ended up on camera was too short a season. This is also the last DC Fontana teleplay of season 1. For season 1, she had contributed to 4 actual teleplays or scripts, and she got credit for 2 story scripts, meaning she was likely rewritten as the process moved along. But this will be our last DC Fontana for season 1. Obviously, a bridge to Star Trek, the original series, and Gene Roddenberry's original vision. In this, we have a famous alumnus, famous if you like genre films and science fiction, Michael Pataki, as UrzaMaster mentioned. We first highlighted him on the original series Warp Core episodes, number 54, in fact. Go back and check your archives. That was The Trouble with Tribbles, and Michael Pataki played a mouthy Klingon who mixed it up with the crew in an observation deck rec room during that episode. But then he went on to 2 of his more famous roles in the 1980s. He was Nikolai Koloff, the evil Soviet boxing technician. I hesitate to say trainer, because as we learned late in the picture, he was actually dosing Ivan Drago with illegal synthetics to give him power that everything he hits, he destroys. That was Michael Pataki. He was also the Dr. Hoffman, the man who didn't think it was a bad idea to let Michael Myers into an ambulance during a thunderstorm on October 30th, 1988, and didn't even call Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasance, to tell him of the prisoner transfer. And if you've seen Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, you know that ambulance ride and Dr. Hoffman's judgment were both poor. And so if you're a Halloween 4 fan, as I am, if you're a Rocky 4 fan, as I am, Michael Pataki terrific character actor. That's how he moved within the shadows, the nooks and crannies of Hollywood. When they needed a villain, an academic type, a professor, a police sergeant, a Klingon, this is who they called, and it's wonderful to have him there. Gentlemen, as we indicated, we have sort of a reverse aging storyline here with 1988 era prosthetic makeup, which don't forget, Star Trek with Michael Westmore and his talented crew. They were responsible for the Ferengis and the Kardashians. Oh, Kardashians. No, Kardashians. Now I'm getting them all confused and all twisted.
Cardassians.
Yes.
Cardassia.
There's no Kardashians on this podcast.
That's right. Thank goodness. Yeah. See, it's all blending together. They're responsible for some fantastic alien makeup over the years in the Bermanverse and beyond. You can be the judge as to whether Clayton Roner's Admiral Jameson holds up, because old age makeup has always been tricky. How much is too much? You can think of Michael J. Fox as an aging Marty McFly in Back to the Future Part 2. It comes as one example. There are other ones we can cite. It's a tricky balancing act, I guess. Now, in the subsequent years, makeup has had leaps and bounds, just like digital effects, visual effects, computer-generated effects. So you can get a little bit more convincing, perhaps, than some of them than we've seen before. But this is all about starting off old and getting younger and friskier. And we have a supposed terrorist rebellion brewing that the Enterprise is called to mediate, but it turns out that there are opaque layers to that storyline. And ultimately, we find that this whole thing is mired in a 4-decade-long civil war. And the repercussions and revenge factors and so forth. So it's got some layers, like a good cake or an onion. It mixes a little political, a little bit of the social, in terms of putting you in that position. What would you do or not do? And that's what good Trek is supposed to give us. So, gentlemen, it may have been too short a season, but was it a long enough and satisfying episode, number 15?
I got to point out something on this one, is that Star Trek tends to lean into the science of things. And I don't think this is the first episode of the season, but this is one of the episodes in the series where they kind of bring in a hint of the mysticism, with the little concoction that he drinks to de-age himself, is sort of based on a mystic recipe. And he's like, I cracked the code. And, rather than like doing the scientific thing, leans into sort of the virile male, like, oh, I can be young and strong and virile again. And it's such an interesting I guess viewpoint from like a top brass, I don't want to say military because it's Starfleet and it's not quite military, but there's definitely still an element of macho there where it's like, if you're an aging person and you could de-age and get your youth back, it's empowering in all of the worst and best ways. And it's kind of heartfelt because he's like, well, we could live forever, me and my wife, my beloved, rather than him like immediately going and like trying to hit on Deanna Troi or Dr. Crusher or something, which, hey, I would have weaved a little bit more of that into the script if it were me, but it's DC Fontana, who's brilliant in her own right. But it's compelling to see somebody just reject their own limitations by age. And I thought that was an interesting commentary because his arch rival, who we run into, is just like loses all of that sort of, all that disdain and all of that hatred is dissolved away when they realize, like, oh my gosh, like, you couldn't even age. Like you refuse to let yourself age gracefully because you're that insecure as a person, and you kind of give up the ship. It takes the wind right out of the sails, so to speak, of having this 4 decades long rivalry of blame and hate, and it's just like, ugh, yeah, I even want to kill you now, like. So I mean, in a way, like it's a goofy episode. The prosthesis, the I'm old now, where it's like clearly you're a young actor. Like you couldn't get an old guy to act and then like have a younger guy who looks sort of similar. Like Hollywood's a big place. I mean, even in the late '80s, like you could find that, right?
Right.
But it works. I like the idea of Iverson's disease and having some kind of medicine behind it, and there's kind of a nice Anne and Mark Jameson story going on there, and the whole idea of he sold weapons to bring about the end of the war. It's obviously a commentary on Iran, and some of that stuff that was going on in the '80s with the Reaganites and stuff. But it's also just like this is a fairly common military sort of situation that people, they sort of find the easy way out, and maybe they regret it, and now they're trying to right past wrongs, and sort of like we see in real life. But it sort of falls short of that goal. It ends up being a bit more about somebody who just can't admit, they're older and they're gonna die someday. Like I kind of like the human element of that more so than the story you could tell about a civil war and a mediator that steps in and does the wrong thing and is trying to right that past wrong, which I think both of those stories, they're pretty great. Like you could make something out of either one of those. But again, we have an episode where they've mashed the two together. Are they as successful together as they would have been apart? I don't know. I think maybe if you downplay one and emphasize the other, you could weave them a little bit better. But it was good. Like I didn't get to the end of this episode thinking, woof, like really forced that sandwich together. It was more like, wow, I kind of didn't expect it to go the way it went. It's definitely like a descent into madness, like if Kurtz was slowly getting younger in Africa, this might be the story that gets told, sort of.
I like that.
But I think it falls a little bit short of that lofty mark.
Yes, it's a messy episode. I mean, the guy who plays Admiral Jameson probably could have been Admiral Akbar as well, because it's a trap. I'm getting old. It's a trap. I mean, they sound very, very, very similar. And the only guy that can do the aging thing right to me is Nigel Terry from Excalibur, because he starts out as this young guy and ends as this old guy, and he looks perfect the entire time doing that. Even though I know we're talking about the aging. This also puts the whole Admiral McCoy thing in perspective, because I know this guy was supposed to be in his 80s, but he also had that disease, right? So I guess maybe that's why he was a little more fragile than Admiral McCoy was at 100. Was McCoy supposed to be like 120 years old or something like that, or 112?
Yeah, like something crazy.
Some ridiculous number. The wheelchair kind of gives me vibes of, oh man, why am I drawing a blank on that? Who's the other guy in the wheelchair? I mean, from original series. Go Pike. Jeez Louise.
Oh, Chris Pike, yeah.
Everyone's going to unsubscribe after that one. Anyway, yeah. So I kind of like the whole, that wheelchair thing. Or he was Professor X. It's one or the other. Good ideas, kind of like Urza said. Poorly executed, maybe. The overacting. I just, I had a hard time with the Karnas storyline at the end, and he suffered enough, just let him die. It was just like, I don't know. It was a little bit, again, good idea, bad execution overall. Maybe I don't even think I can completely pin it on the actors at this point, but it was just kind of a rough episode. I agree. Maybe stick with one storyline or do something different with it.
It was kind of like the crew of the Enterprise was just along for the ride for this one too.
Right. I liked the relationship between Admiral Jameson and his wife, if only because to see a mature relationship as it is, and she's basically resigned herself as at his age to taking care of him, and she loves him clearly, and wants to be supportive and all of that, and then when the realization that he's been doing this dangerous thing to try to he thinks he's doing it because it will increase her love for him, because suddenly he'll be that guy that she fell in love with, all those years ago. And in fact, she's horrified, it looks like, to some degree, because of the risk he's taking and the obvious damages and the fact that she could lose him because of this, don't mess with Mother Nature. And I would not have appreciated that at 15 years old when I first would have seen this in 1988, but I certainly can appreciate it now, decades later, in a relationship. Don't call it a marriage. I can certainly appreciate that sort of wanting the quiet moments of devotion and so forth, and then trying to reason with it. So actually, for those scenes and that little simmering subplot, I was actually kind of playing a what if game. Like, well, what if suddenly I was back in my college days and, so forth? What would my, significant other say or do? Would she be supportive? Would she also run screaming into the hills? Would she, So that aspect of it, again, that's not really what the episode's about, but that subtext came through, and that did hit a little bit, in terms of me, and I appreciated the effort there with that couple.
Yeah.
No, I think the idea is there. It made. I mean, I was thinking about it. And as you get older, which UrzaMaster, this will happen to you in about 15 or 16 years, maybe. But the idea of, if I could, maybe de-age is the right word, or it's the whole thing of, if I could go back then, with the knowledge I have now. And I'm not talking about like a Back to the Future thing where I could become a millionaire, because I know what's going to happen with all of the different sports events, but the idea that I could go back with this wisdom that I've allegedly gained, and be, 18 again or something like that. I think that's every man goes through that at some point, wishing that they had that. I mean, I'm, being 52, I'm like, sometimes I wish my body was 40. And I remember when I was 30, thinking, man, I wish I was 20. It's very odd how that starts to happen as you age. So, and I think that's a good point too that Fert Derby brings up. At 15 years old, I'm not. It's like, what's the big deal?
You're not thinking of that
because you're young and virile, baby, right? And here, it's being 52, and I look at my parents, my mom who's 72. It's like, man, that's right around the corner. I remember laying in bed thinking to myself, oh, when it's, I'm going to be 30 one day, I'm going to be 40 one day, and 10 years from now, I'm going to be 62. And because Mary and I were talking about that last night, about, retiring and our pensions and stuff like that, and it's like, holy cow, time flies.
It's where I think Star Trek in the 80s, was asking a lot of these questions that no other show was touching at the time. Like, I think now a lot of TV explores sort of those feelings and those things that you really didn't talk about. Like, Radar was never talking about this, I mean, they played with some heavy duty firepower on MASH, and maybe on Cheers you got a little bit, but like, you didn't get this like confrontation with aging, and either way you die, right? This guy gets younger and then destroys himself in the process. Could it have been done right? And that's the thing, is like, the science might have been able to prove this out to where it's an effective de-aging cure, but it is interesting now, and absolutely, when I saw this episode for the first time, it was in syndication, so I was probably 15. I mean, probably was that age. Did not register with me one iota. The whole story here was like an old man trying to relive his glory days, literally, and in the process thereof, like ends up basically killing himself and ruining everything that he had, all the good things he had. You know, a loving wife who's like not resigned to just taking care of her husband till death do they part, but actually like kind of looking forward to like, hey, these are our quiet years. We get to just enjoy each other's company and the simple things, and that's a beautiful way of looking at life. Like, you know, that retirement age where you do get to do the things you want to do and enjoy the people around you and treasure those simple moments. You don't need these big flashy moments of youth where you defuse a civil war, which is kind of like, I mean, you know, I think what Picard does really well with this, you know, is getting all the old farts together on the bridge of the Enterprise. You still got it. Like, you know, this guy's wheelchair bound, sure, but like, you know, there's something about aging gracefully. Patrick Stewart's what, his 90s? Like, you know, you can age and still be pretty damn cool and effective. And I think even in the 80s and 90s, like that wasn't like nobody looked at an old guy and went, ugh. You know, you still had what freaking Tom Selleck getting starring roles for the next what he's still starring on TV shows. Blue Bloods just came out like 5 years ago. Like it's probably 15 now, but I mean, there's something to that where it's like I think it's a common man story more than it is the story of you know, a Starfleet person. I wouldn't expect a Starfleet captain or admiral to have the same kind of human flaws. And that's kind of cool in a way to see that, like, you know, I could see some men going through this and being like, oh, I wish I could do that. Wouldn't that be great? But they wouldn't do it to then bring their wife on board, right? They do it to go to the bunny ranch or something. Like, those are the kinds of folks, you know, that would be taking this cure. They're not out there because they want to live another lifetime with their wife. You know,
Good call.
And I think honestly, I think Dax is probably the best representation of that. Where it's like, yeah, you get your lifetime. It's great. You have some great times. I've been a mother. I've been a father. Like, it's awesome. And then you go do it again, and it's like, oh, that's actually kind of a radder way to look at it than this, like, I'm going to take a de-aging potion and maybe disintegrate.
You know,
I hope the phaser fights get better, because one of the tropiest things, which is just the tropey of tropiness, is when someone goes, "Look out, you're gonna get shot," basically, and then Worf like dives to save Jeffries. It's such a tropey thing, but just the idea of, I think that's where Star Wars kind of had the leg up on them at this point, were things like that. Now, allegedly, when DS9 comes along, at least in terms of space battles, they kind of move it up a notch to be, you know, kind of Star Wars-y, so I'm looking forward to that. But hopefully the phaser battles get better too.
No, sorry. The UrzaMaster just got me thinking in the timeline. Okay, we have a Starfleet admiral. Think of the original series. Think of how the Starfleet was, you know, sparingly used to just send them on missions off camera. Starfleet wants us to investigate this and that. But here's a guy who has ulterior motives. You don't have to call them evil or shady, but he's keeping secrets, and he's not exactly the most upstanding, stalwart, you know, Picard-like example of the best of Starfleet. And this is 3 years before Undiscovered Country, when we actually had an honest-to-God conspiracy in Starfleet to wreck peace plans and so forth, which then gets us into later seasons of this show in DS9 Section 31. So this episode, as strange as it is kind of like, I think, literally the embryonic stage of not all Starfleet personnel are high-minded, you know, people, and that they do have these, quote, flaws. And like I say, he doesn't have some evil plan to kidnap a society, the Baku, and transport them off their world to steal the Fountain of Youth, blah, blah, blah. But it kind of, I can't think of example in the original series or in prior treks up to here, season 1, where Starfleet has been shown as sort of less than the idyllic, perfect government slash, body and so forth. This might be one of the first little tiny seeds that says just because they're wearing the uniform doesn't mean that they're not flawed, human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Well,
So-
he breaks the completely breaks the prime directive.
Well, yeah.
And so
Whatever
that's an
happened
excellent
to?
point. Yeah, I mean, just destroys it and then has a war going on for 40 years and then tries to make up for it. But I think that's a great point because that's what we see here. Like, he just decimates the idea of Starfleet doing the right thing, right? And
Right.
prime directive goes by the wayside.
It's that song "Glory Days" in Starfleet, right
yes.
there is what it is. He's talking about all these old enemies, like they're all dead. It's just you and me. Like, we can finish this right here and now. And in a way, it's interesting because I think this period in the 80s is the Hatfields and McCoys, like, they did a bunch of shows on that, or like history shows on it. I remember seeing, and it went on through the 90s too, but it's like, this is a Hatfield and McCoy story is what it is. It's an adaptation of that Romeo and Juliet type situation. I mean, I know Hatfield McCoy was a real life thing, but it's interesting to see that same type of story play out even in the 24th century. And it's like, this is pretty intense. Like, to see the elder statesman end up having to close out the book on something. So I think the writing is great. I agree with Lord Uther here. I think the execution probably fell short. There were definitely moments that were truly heartfelt where, I think between husband and wife, you get some pretty interesting emotional dynamics, and then you get some interesting little, brash youth versus aging, enemy type of thing. Like, that was kind of cool. But yeah, look, you have a laser gun. Like, that should travel at the speed of light. You're not just tackling somebody out of the way. That's not how lasers work. So it's interesting. But that brings us to our Warp Core ratings. And I think Season 1, Next Generation, we have to take into account, like, we've not really hit the fever pitch of Next Gen. As we've talked before, Season 1 kind of finds its feet a little more than anything else, but we've got DC Fontana on board, so we should expect big things. Let's start with Fert Derby this week. Fert, where did you fall on this episode?
I think the episode, and for the reasons we've discussed it, is a very solid 4, but I'm giving it an extra Warp Core 5 for Michael Pataki and Michael Pataki alone, and I admit that that's my bias. So without Pataki, it's a straight 4. It's as you say, not foundational Trek, although the Starfleet question now has me thinking. But I love seeing some of these late 80s performers that I was watching as I was, maturing and growing up, like sneak into these television shows and other movies and other media. So yes, Pataki's worth a Warp Core by himself for me. So it's going to be a 5 based on that and that alone. But I acknowledge that the episode overall is probably closer to the 4.
Yeah, I'll go, I'm going to go 4.5 because of our discussion. So, again, the idea was there, poorly executed. Whose fault? Not sure. But again, it's a trap. So, with that being said, I'll go 4.5.
As we talk about the similarities between Admiral Akbar and the voice of our beloved Admiral here, who meets his demise, I would have liked a little bit more Southern drawl, kind of like we get from DeForest Kelley in the first episode. You don't look like a Vulcan. Like, do all old men sort of speak like a bullfrog?
I hope not.
I mean, maybe when I get there, I'll have that Civil War general beard. It'll be pure white. But I'm going to go 5. I actually enjoy this episode quite a bit. It's not the best executed. Like I said, it's 2 separate stories that were probably stronger on their own. And I don't... They do this a lot in Next Gen, and I don't care for it, where the crew is kind of just pulled along on somebody else's story. And they add to it, but they don't really drive the story in this case. And I love the idea, and I would have given it 4.5, but the idea that this is the tip of the hat to Starfleet's not perfect, and the allusions to like a Section 31, where it's like, hey, you know, Starfleet did do all these missions, and they're still like human. Like literally in this case, it's a human captain that did this, or admiral. That's not for nothing. Like, I do think that this sort of builds on that Berman verse idea of darker things afoot within Starfleet. And we, of course, will see that in upcoming episodes of Next Gen as well, including one really exciting episode I can't wait to talk about that I would consider absolutely foundational, particularly given the way that Picard Season 3 ended. But until we get to that point, make sure to set your phasers to fun.
Hey. I see what you did there.
Because this is episode 104 of the Warp Core podcast. We are headed on our 2nd century of Warp Core episodes. That's all thanks to you, Pending Rebrand fans. We couldn't do this without you. Drop us a comment, like, subscribe, share with all your friends. If you've got Trekkies, friends, or family, come along with us. I know there's a lot of different Star Trek podcasts out there. We respect and love every one of them, but as we are among them, we would ask that you help us get to our goals, which is to continue to go on that unending mission to explore strange new worlds, new civilizations, and to always make it so.